But looking ahead, we are excited to be on our surface flight software. This is a much more surface capable, a lot more capabilities for the surface mission as part of this flight software load. It will take us a few days to transition, but once we're on that load, it will allow us to do further in-depth checkouts of the instrument, as well as deploy the robotic arm and exercise some of the turret items that you see in this image. So you can see that we have our coring drill in the center, our pixel and Sherlock instruments mounted to the side, and that black paint is to support the gas dust removal tool, which will remove dust from the surfaces that we will be inspecting later. So coming up here, the wheels, if you noticed in the image now, are off to the side. We will be performing a wiggle. We'll straighten those up. We'll do a short drive.
Greetings, travelers. We are actually early today because NASA has a press conference, which we're joining now.
Very excited to be happily on the surface and exercising our system and looking for what's ahead. So going back to our partnership with the larger Mars spacecraft and science teams and community, we're really excited that the MRO spacecraft, Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, and the HiRISE team was able to find our hardware on the surface of Mars. So if you see in this image, if the next pop-up, you can see that we have the descent stage, the parachute, and the heat shield all here.
Hey, that's awesome.
With a few stats here, the descent stage is about 700 meters away from where Perseverance is on the surface. Parachute is about 1.2 kilometers, and the heat shield about 1.5 kilometers.
Hypothetically, they'll be able to drive the rover over to actually take a look at these things. Or even fly the Ingenuity helicopter over there if it functions properly.
The HiRISE image was able to actually acquire the entry, descent, and landing event from their perspective, and we can never have enough images of this activity, and so this is a fantastic view. But I'm going to send it back to Dave here. He, as part of this suite, we have one more surprise, or one more gift, I'll say, that we've been able to receive from this package. Over to you, Dave.
Thanks, Jessica. So I think we probably have overloaded your visual sense for a little bit, but we're going to do something a little bit different. And
it's the audio one.
So I'm going to get rid of this.
Let's turn off our audio. Let's see what we got here.
And I'm going to talk to you now with this. This is the microphone that was part of the EDO camera system. When the EDO cam system was first mentioned, it was set up as just a bunch of cameras to capture some amazing imagery on the surface of Mars. And about a year or so after it was first conceived, I got a phone call, another call from Matt. After talking to headquarters, asked the question, could we possibly put a microphone as part of our EDO camera system? So we worked with the team, we took a look, and sure enough, it was something that we could do. And so we started off that detailed design and identifying a microphone that would work for us and getting it onto the vehicle. About a year after this first started, I was giving a tour at JPL. And I happened to mention to the group that I was giving the tour to that the decision had come down and we were working to actually include a microphone onto the vehicle. And after the tour was done, a gal came up to me and she said some things to me that I won't forget anytime soon. She said, I'm super excited that you guys are going to try to put a microphone onto the rover and get it to the surface of Mars. And I was very appreciative. And I asked her afterwards, I said, I'm curious, why is it that this relates to you so much? And her response was that her sister was visually impaired. She was not able to see these images that we saw earlier or that we sent down in the past. And while she tries to describe them to her, she felt that she just can't quite capture that same sense of amazement that she gets when she gets them visually. And that by actually getting a microphone onto the surface of Mars, the hope was that she'd be able to experience things on Mars the same way that she was when she actually looked at them. And that stuck with me. We continued to work super hard to make sure that this microphone would work. And that's part of the reason we were disappointed why it didn't work when we actually went and did our entry, descent, and landing sequence. I wish I had actually captured that individual's name. I would love to reach out to her now and say, we've done it. I hope your sister is enjoying it. Because what I'm going to show you in a second, or what you're going to hear in a second, is actually the first sounds being recorded from the surface of Mars. So there are 2 microphones on the Perseverance vehicle. There's this microphone here, which is part of the entry, descent, and landing system, and there's a second microphone that's on the SuperCam instrument. And we're counting on both of these instruments, recording some absolutely amazing sounds from the surface of Mars. So with that, I invite you now to, if you would like to close your eyes and just imagine yourself sitting on the surface of Mars and listening to the surroundings. If I could have the first one, please.
That's pretty cool.
So that gentle whirl that happens in the background, that is a noise made by the rover. But yes, what you did hear 10 seconds in was an actual wind gust on the surface of Mars, picked up by the microphone and sent back to us here on Earth. The analysis indicates that was around a 5 meter per second type of wind gust. So we can sit here now and actually tell you that we have recorded sounds from the surface of Mars. So we have a second one, which basically further reduces the noise of the rover, so you can just hear what the wind would sound like on Mars.
We'll be doing our planetarium show in just a little bit, but this NASA thing is important, so we're watching this first.
It's cool. It's really neat, overwhelming, if you will. I can't remember what I was going to go and say next. So looking forward to doing some amazing things with the microphones going forward. We need to work with the ops team. There's some great science that they're looking to do. We're hopeful that we continue to use these microphones, both the microphone and the EDO
microphone looks like it's built off of an old RGB
the rocks interacting with the surface.
Interface. It's about that size, based on his hand.
So as you've heard and will continue to hear, we're just beginning to do amazing things on the surface of Mars. And now Ken is going to talk to you a little bit about the science that we've done to date and what they're looking forward to doing as we continue to move forward.
Thanks, Dave. And I'll start by just taking this opportunity to say to Matt, Dave, Al, and everybody else on this fantastic team, thank you for the ride of a lifetime. That is just incredible, what we've seen today, and what I'm sure we'll continue to see as the mission unfolds. So with all the focus on these spectacular videos and audio, we wanted to make sure to remind you that there's plenty of science going on already, with hundreds of team members poring over every new image. So if we can get the first of those images, as you'll see in this NavCam frame,
stay on the other one.
Seem like very
go back. There we go.
Light rocks, dark rocks, holy rocks. That's holy with an E. We use these very generic terms at this early stage until we have more data that allow us to test our hypotheses and make more confident.
The scientific method.
Follow along with the mission, and you'll see that the theme. As we get closer,
come back to what we're looking at, please.
Continues to resolve, and a coherent story emerges.
There we go.
Next image, please. Finally, I just want to briefly point out that we are finding real science value in these EDLCam videos. Here you can see a beautiful new perspective on the Jezero Delta. And if we can get the next image, also a new perspective on some of the beautiful stratigraphy around our landing site, which is
that's interesting.
On the far right side of this image. So now to put all of this in context for us, I'll hand it over to Dr. Thomas Zurbuchen.
Well, what we've seen here today is really nothing short of amazing. You know, and perhaps you've had moments like this before. Some of you have told me that. I was too young to remember, but they had a moment like that, for example, when they observed the first landing on the moon. They had moments like that where it felt that we took a big leap, not just in this case because of at JPL or at NASA, but a big leap as humanity. Of course, it's a leap that was enabled by work over decades, and on this mission for close to a decade. So what's possible today, or what feels possible, is different even than yesterday. It's how it feels to make history, and that's how I feel today. I'm so moved by this. Wow. The video of Perseverance descent and landing, and the amazing panorama, and the first wide landscape shot of Jezero Crater seen with human eyes, and the first Martian sounds are the closest you can get to landing on Mars without putting on a pressure suit. That video, I believe, should become mandatory viewing for young people who not only want to explore other worlds and build spacecraft to take them there, but also want to be part of diverse teams achieving all the audacious goals of our future. At the center of that is a team, and I'll ask for the next image. You should know, I met this team. I see me there in a dark suit next to Dr. Laurie Glaze, the Planetary Division Director, and Al, he just talked to you, is on his knee in there, and he entered the Ascent and Landing team, and we met him just hours before that historic landing. And I love this picture because, of course, the event today demonstrates that the human aspect of exploration. And that is, of course, every reason for what we can do at NASA, and also why we do things. The video and audio and images here provided to us are from the surface of Mars, and sometimes we forget as we look at that. Well, Robert shouldn't get all the fun. We want to make sure that all of us on Earth see and feel what it's like to be on Mars and explore other worlds. I'm so excited for the more than 1 million students who joined the Mars Student Challenge, and the many more across the world who will be inspired by these images released today and even yesterday. Their journey is also just the beginning. Just imagine Perseverance sitting on a hill, recording the next Martian landing with a cargo that is basically a rocket, and then the first from another world with samples bound for Earth that are collected by Perseverance now in the near future. Imagine follow the entry, descent, and landing of the first human crew on the planetary surface sometimes in the future. These future historic events, which I'm confident will happen, will be enabled by women and men working in diverse teams. Imagine the goals we can achieve together. So what is possible? Sometimes to address that question, it's good to look back and think where we've come from, just like my friend Mike did earlier. We've been on a journey, both as a human race for quite a while now, and I don't want to show this next image of Sojourner, of the Pathfinder mission, which was designed for 7 sols or Martian days or so, maybe 30. Ultimately lasted for 85 Earth days.
Remember we talked about this in our Mars landing primer video a few days back.
Distinctly, a true Pathfinder indeed. It weighed 23 pounds, and it returned a surprising amount of data back to Earth, and a surprising amount of science for many scientists, I must say. Some people didn't expect quite that much, and that's what happens sometimes too when you innovate, just like we've seen here. We've grown from that seed. Now Perseverance is the size of a small car, and it's ready for us for the next shine leaps. And here's a picture that we're putting up. That is one of the many pictures that we're releasing. And of course, it's a picture, one of my absolute favorites. And that's a picture of the sample caching system on there, because it's that.
A lot of these are for camera.
To the samples that will bring back to Earth
testing, especially when they start getting covered up with dust, to see how dusty they are, and testing camera color coding.
Looking at it before we packed it up from JPL and moved it over, then of course launched it from the top of a rocket. This, my friends, is one of the indelible moments in NASA's history where what we can see and what we can learn and what we can hope for in the future and the extraordinary emotions that makes it feel all of us coming together. That human element will fuel our future at Mars, which is bright indeed. And it will fuel the dreams of a new generation that will return to Mars and also study the samples that we will eventually bring home. I'm so grateful to this team and literally the thousands, both at JPL and within the US and around the world, to all of you who have engaged in this mission. As has been noted, the raw image pipeline is opening up. Please go take a look at these data and play with them, especially those of you, the children and the youth that have signed up to our educational campaign. What can you find in these pictures? And who's going to compose the first piece of music with actual Mars sound?
I'm on it, baby.
Senator Al, many of you leaders, could not be more proud of both you and your team. On behalf of our entire NASA leadership team, a heartfelt and a proud thanks to you. For the record, Matt, I'm so glad for your idea about these cameras. We will learn a lot from that, much more than we ever expected. And of course, this is just a start. For the surface team, the real work starts now to evaluate the surrounding and start a plan and our trajectory across Jezero Crater. It's a big team and there are lots of discussions, but that's science in action. Stay with us. There is much more amazement to come. Back to you, Raquel.
Thank you, Thomas. And we'll now move on to your questions. Remember, if you are a member of the media on the phone line, you can press *1 to get into the queue. If you're on social media, you can tag questions with the hashtag Countdown to Mars. Now, starting on the phone line is Bill Harwood from CBS News.
Yeah, hi. I guess this is for Al or maybe for Matt. I mean, other than the loose spring you guys saw in the heat shield, is there anything at all in that video that looked off nominal? I mean, you know, it looked like it was almost textbook. And I'm not saying that just to, I don't know, give you free praise, but I didn't see, you know, I don't see anything like that. So is there anything?
Oh, God, this guy's microphone is terrible.
I can take that one. We've been poring over those videos and looking for anything that could be wrong, and also looking at the rest of the data. And we did have a pretty clean run through entry, descent, and landing. There were a couple of bits of the parachute lid that came off. Some of that was expected. In fact, we knew that there was some risk of that as well. And there was, if you look at the video, you can actually see a chunk. That's the radome. It's a cover for one of the Logian antennas we used during cruise and also during part of EDL. That came off. We had hoped that it wouldn't, and we tried to restrain it a little bit better, but we knew that it was a risk that it might. So that's something we noticed that's on.
Fix it next time.
A couple other little things that we've been taking a look at. But I think you're in general right that the entry, descent, and landing system behaved as expected, and it did what it had to do. Especially given, and a big shout out to the terrain relative navigation system, which put us down in the safest spot that was available to us. The places that we had to choose from weren't great if we didn't have something like terrain relative navigation. So, yeah, the landing system worked great.
Great, thanks, Al. And up next, we have Marcia Dunn from the Associated Press.
Yes, hi. Wonderful video. I'm just wondering, did the JPL team get to see snippets coming down of the video, and then, or did you have to wait until this 1 minute video was put together? What was the reaction when you first saw the video and laid eyes on it? And for David, why do you think the mic didn't work during descent? Thank you.
I could say a couple words about the first part. I had trouble leaving this mission support area this week just because I kept waiting for every little bit of information to come back from, particularly from these cameras, but from the vehicle in general. And I can tell you, every time we got something, people were overjoyed, giddy. They were like kids, you know, in a candy store. You know, we'd get a thumbnail, which literally is just a really low-res, blobby-looking thing of one of those videos that came down first, and we'd just be falling on the floor excited with what we were seeing. And that's before even the high-res came. You know, there's a lot of people that have contributed to this entry, descent, and landing system. Our chief engineer, Adam Stelzner, happens to be here in the studio. He was kind of the father of the sky crane system. This started 15 years ago for him. He and his team have never seen this system operate before, not even on the Earth, because we can't test it on the Earth. So this is the first time we've had a chance as engineers to actually see what we designed. And I just can't, it's hard for me to express just how emotional it was and how exciting it was for everybody as we got this information down. I'll turn it over to Dave to say a couple words.
Hey Dave, before you say that, can I just chime in on the first image? This is Justin. I will say, when we get these first images from any of these imaging systems, the test images never look as good as the real thing. It's not even close. In fact, it's very hard to simulate a lot of these things, especially these, you know, sky cranes and things. And so the images that we normally see during test programs are, you know, there's always like a ladder in the background, or the lighting's never quite right, or there's a car. In the case of the EDO cams, we have these big targets out in parking lots, and we were dodging cars to try to do our tests and things. And so that moment that you get these images from Mars, it's just kind of an electric feeling where it just all just snaps into place, and you get these pictures that are just like perfectly, you know, they're pictures of Mars that you can never simulate here on Earth. And I think that we all experience that, especially after we go through months and months of testing, and the images don't really look that great. And, you know, people get skeptical, like, are these cameras really that great? Because, you know, that looks like a garage or something. So it's just amazing to get these pictures, and I think we all feel that way, because we're all seeing pictures of insides of labs and everything, and they're never that great, but it's amazing to get these photos from Mars. Okay. Yeah,
I'll give you my take. So Thursday evening and Friday, when the data started to come down and we kind of realized what we had, I was sitting at home, and my phone started to go off, and I was getting FaceTimes from people who were in the MSA. And what was happening was that they were starting to show them on the monitors that we have hanging on the wall. And people were turning their phones around and saying, Grul, you got to see this reaction. And people were just jumping up and down and giddy and ecstatic. And it was a great feeling. I mean, from where I was sitting, I not only was excited to see these videos and what we had captured, it was also the fact that a lot of people had put in a lot of effort in to make this system work. And to actually reward that effort and to pay it back and get this excitement going, it made me super happy. I was glad to see that all the hard work, all the dedication had come in, and that everyone was just excited about not only what we had captured, but also what this mission could do going forward. So, it was a great feeling. It was a feeling I won't forget for quite some time. And then regarding the question about the microphone, we started to look at it. What we think happened is that there was a communication error between the device that is responsible for digitizing the analog signals that the microphone picked up and then passing them back to the computer that actually stores all the data. We're not exactly sure why it happened. It could have been a fact that it was just so much data streaming into the system. We tested it, but you know, obviously everything's a little bit different on Mars than we actually have here on the ground. So we were pretty quickly able to determine we didn't think there was a hardware issue with the microphone, which is why we were able to approach the project and get their concurrence to try to turn the microphone on then on that Sol 2 boundary. It's just unfortunate that error happened during the EDL, and we just weren't able to record any of the data that we generated during the sequence.
All right, thanks. And up next we have Chris Davenport from the Washington Post.
Hi, thanks for taking the time and for showing this. I really appreciate it. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the cameras that were used to record the video. I understand they were specially designed maybe by a commercial company called SLIR Systems. Just curious to know, like, what goes into, you know, design.
Again, we are watching this NASA live feed from somewhere, I believe JPL. This is for the Mars 2020 Mars rover Perseverance. This is a press conference. We're just kind of listening in.
Which was
be getting to our planetarium show in just a little bit.
And I can tell you that the modifications we made to the camera were minimal. This was not a camera specifically designed for use on Mars. you can purchase the same camera off the internet for whatever applications you might have for it. The only things we did is we actually added some bonding material on the inside to try to make sure that in the dynamic environment of launch and then that mortar fire event that I talked about, that the camera would continue to operate. And then we had to swap out a couple pieces on the inside because in the vacuum of space, they had the ability to outgas material. And if that material deposited itself on the detector, then we wouldn't get the clear images that we actually got. But other than that, it was not specially designed for use for this application. It is a commercial off-the-shelf camera.
Thank you. And up next, we have Michael Sheets from CNBC.
Hi, congratulations again on capturing stunning footage of this landing. I'm curious on two aspects. I mean, one, Adam Seltzer, you guys had said that in 15 years since he really engineered the sky crane, he never actually seen it in operation. I'm curious what Adam thinks about seeing this work on another planet, and secondarily, how this informs and how being able to actually see the landing informs future missions, even as NASA looks to one day land astronauts. What does this really teach you about trying to get people on the surface of Mars?
Let's see. Adam's not up here, but I can channel him for just a moment, perhaps, and tell you that this is a thrill of a lifetime. I think not just for Adam, but all the people that contributed to this architecture development. Back on Curiosity, I remember when we first briefed this system, with the supersonic parachutes and multi-body systems, and we're going to lower this thing on a tether, and people just looked at us like we were insane, And Adam and his team, of which Al was part. They kept at it, and they explained why it made sense. They explained why it was robust. They explained why it would work. It was not easy to build, I will tell you that, as the flight system manager on Curiosity. But once you build it and once you test it, it's something that really is designed inherently to interact with the uncertainties that Mars throws at you. And so I think being able to see his system operate like this, in high definition, landing at Jezero, it doesn't get too much better than that, I don't think. So I'm going to throw it to Al. He can maybe say a few words about the types of technologies and information that we have on the technologies on the system and information we got getting back from EDL and will be getting back as part of our reconstruction activity that feed into the future.
Yeah, I think we can talk about a lot of things. But as Matt mentioned, as a fresh-faced kid, when the sky crane was invented, and I was in that room, and it's amazing to see it finally in action. Even though we knew it worked once, we didn't know for sure it was going to work again. And then for it to work again, and then for us to see it is incredible. And just starting with sky crane there, you can see some things that I think are going to be useful to the future. One thing that's, of course, of a lot of interest, especially as we start landing bigger things, is the plume-ground interaction. The interaction between those rockets and what they're doing to the ground and how they kick things around. And we've got great video of that here this time, both from the rover download camera and the descent stage download camera. You can see how they create those scours and stuff gets pushed together and creates a sheet underneath the rover. We can see that all occurring. So that's super useful. The parachute stuff too, one thing we didn't show necessarily here is that the parachute upload cameras, the two that we got, are at 75 frames per second. So we can see that inflation that only occurs in 0.7 seconds, in less than a second. And see that snap open and look at all the details of how it unfolds and how it's symmetrically inflated. And all those things are very useful for future missions, both whether they're landing more things in people or stuff and then people. SRL, other missions are going to use, future missions like the sample retrieval missions are likely going to use things like parachutes and rockets, of course. So we're very interested in seeing how those cameras and what we see in those camera images can teach us about how those systems are actually performing and make our systems more robust in the future.
Thanks, Alan. Matt. Up next, we have Ken Chang from the New York Times.
Hi, thank you. I was wondering if you can give me a few more details about
how the data came back. So it was 30 gigabytes that was collected. How much has come back, and what was the data rate that you were able to send them information back? Thank you.
Maybe Jessica can.
So I can say that as part of our commissioning activity, we actually walk the data rate up over the course of our different overflights with the orbiters. And so we start with a lower rate, 2,000,
Find your words.
8,000,
Come on.
and then we increase that into an adaptive data rate with the orbiter, in which we can continue to go many megabits. 2 meg, 8 meg, and then much further beyond that over the course. The total volume that I don't have off the top of my head, and so maybe I don't know if that's something that Dave or we can provide for you later.
Justin, do you have how many images we got back?
Yeah, we counted. So we counted yesterday that we're releasing today. There's about 4,500 that we've gotten so far that we're pushing out to the web today. I will mention that when the orbiters fly overhead, the compasses typically return, let's say, 500 to 900 megabits per pass. And we've had, I don't know, we've had a lot of them now, like 5 or 10 of them.
We had about 2 to 3 overflights per night, and it does vary. The rates I was referring to are the communication rates from the rover to the orbiter. And then once that's collected...
Okay, so we'll actually have some cool stuff to talk about here in a little bit, too.
Smaller, 80 to 100, and where we've had other passes which have been significant amounts of data up at 700. And so it is variable per orbiter.
So if you're just joining us, we started early, we caught the NASA thing late, so we are listening to this, the NASA Mars Perseverance update.
Cameras, we're using a commercial computer, an Intel-based PC that's running Linux, open source. So it's the first open source, at least that I know of, open source Linux box running on the surface of Mars. Inside the rover, it's quite compact.
That's amazing.
So there's the Linux operating system, and we compress the video using FFmpeg, which is another open source tool. So thank you to the open source community.
That's how you save money.
For allowing us to use your amazing software. Appreciate it.
We're going to go over some of this stuff here in a little bit.
As Jessica said, you saw
Oh,
some
man.
terrific imagery from the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter.
There's a lot of stuff.
Fantastic support from the orbiter community, not just MRO for both that imagery and the comms, but also from Maven, which is a Goddard spacecraft, from Odyssey, one of our older orbiters, and from the ESA, European Trace Gas Orbiter as well. Some of the biggest.
How you doing? Thanks for joining us. We'll get to our planetarium show in a little bit.
Came from our partners in Europe, and so thank you all to them.
Right now we're just kind of hanging out watching this press conference.
Is Mike Wall from space.com.
Space.com.
Thank you all for doing this, and yeah, it's really amazing video. Thanks for sharing it. There's a question for Dave. What do you anticipate doing maybe with the EDL mic now that it's up and running? Do you see it having any kind of diagnostic uses during the deployments of the robotic arm and sort of like the instrument checkouts and so forth? What do you see it doing aside from recording Martian wind and the sound of the dirt under the wheels and so on? Thank you.
Yes, we've had a lot of discussion about how we might be able to use both the EDO cam microphone and the super cam microphone to do those type of diagnostic stuff. I mean, the ops team right now, I don't want to speak for Jessica, but they're focused on getting the
EDL is the interdescent and landing system.
Definitely not the first priority. They need to focus on getting this vehicle ready to perform some amazing science. But that doesn't mean in the future we could not sit down and discuss the possibility of capturing audio files of an actuator as it actually spins on the surface of Mars. The noise is an incredible thing that engineers can use to basically detect the health of moving systems, gears and actuators and things like that. And so if we get a snapshot of a actuator today, and you can compare over time, do another snapshot, another audio file of that actuator in the future, compare the two and see if there's anything that can be learned in terms of the health of that device. Now, with that said, I do need to remind everybody that the microphone that's in the EDO camera system, just like all of the cameras and other hardware, is off-the-shelf hardware. It is not designed to live in the hostile environment of Mars. It gets down 120 degrees plus below zero at night, and then it warms up significantly more in the day to minus 40 or something like that. So those temperature cycles and that cold temperature are going to significantly limit the life of these devices. They're just not designed to last for long periods of time.
So that's interesting. Are they admitting that they are cutting corners by just using off-the-shelf stuff instead of designing things in-house?
I think, as you heard, I think.
I mean, that's how you lower
we're always surprised
expense,
by
but
how rugged and robust some of our items are, how long they actually last. They continue to operate far longer than we designed them. We've gotten pretty lucky over the last couple of days. Perhaps we'll get lucky and the hardware will continue to operate on the surface of Mars and allow us to do those type of diagnostic things.
this shouldn't be about luck. This should be about getting it done right the first time.
Well, I can say that application was one of the things that we had projected and tested and wanted to make sure that even though this was a capability that was part of the cruise and entry descent and landing software package that we're operating right now, we've also carried that capability forward into our surface software. And so, assuming the hardware is good, we're open and ready to use it.
Yeah, and I will mention to the question, we actually have gotten requests from instrument teams wanting to turn on the microphone to observe their instrument functioning. Moxie is one of the instruments that's going to be generating oxygen, has compressors and scroll pumps and things. And they actually want us to use the microphones to do diagnostic acoustic measurements. So I actually think that this might become something that all rovers might want, because everybody knows that when you hear something squeaking, it's diagnostic. Maybe you need to get out, and it tells you a little bit about how it works. And so we will find out how these get used. It's actually kind of exciting, and we're getting requests from the team. So we're looking to put those in the plan.
I hope it does survive long enough so that we can hear those wheels crunch over the surface of the planet, because I think we would hear it. And I think
crunchy, crunchy, crunch.
That big rotary percussive jackhammer drill taking that first sample of a rock on Mars.
If this is what you guys wanted to do, maybe you should have really built a microphone for it.
For some of those events.
Great. And up next is Lisa Grossman from Science News.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. The video is amazing, and a lot of it looks a lot like the animations that you've shown before the landing to kind of advertise this. Excuse me. Going forward, how will you distinguish the video that is the real video from the animations to kind of make it clear to people what they're looking at and keep them from getting confused or not be fuel for conspiracy theorists saying we haven't actually done this?
I guess I could try to take that one. I mean, I think we should label very clearly which ones are from Mars and not. I think it's clear to a lot of us, but I think you're right, given the way that the animation's been pretty good. I get a sense for how that could be confusing. I think we should label them going forward. Now that we have this kind of video, we should be clear what's real.
What a great problem to have.
Exactly. I mean, it's an amazing problem to have.
Justin, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I can attest to it's real. It's actually real. I know, because I know the data very well. It's stunning and it's real. And that was our thought too when we first saw it. We're like, wow, this looks like doesn't look real, but it is, and that's what's so amazing about it. And I know I've seen some of the video games are getting pretty good. Second glance, you look at a sports game and it looks like it's real, but it's fake. But this is actually real stuff, and that's why it's so exciting. And I actually just want to say, for those of you that want to go watch the videos, personally I like watching like quarter speed or even slower, because there's so much detail in there that anyone who's done animations knows that would take a lot of time to do. And it all happens so quickly, and the camera cut everything, and so that's how we know it's real, because we know so much about these systems, but there's just so much detail that's one.
Oh dear.
You could look at, but yeah.
There's one other thing I forgot too. I remember early on MSL.
That doesn't inspire confidence, friend.
Curiosity's landing. We had a discussion about the plumes actually coming out of the descent stage, and the fact that they were clear and that you wouldn't see them in real life, like you don't see them in the rover upload camera. But we thought that it would be that people would be expecting to see them in the animation, so they took some artistic license in putting them there. So here, I can tell you now that hopefully our future animations will show the right thing and show the clear plumes like you see in the real video.
Yeah, and the same comment for the exquisite detail on the rover. If you actually look at every cal target's in place, every little twist, every tie, cable tie, they're all there. In the animations, you usually don't have that. When you get down to that level of detail, at least now you typically don't, because a lot of the things happen kind of last minute, and as the rover's getting built and people slap things on and they're not in the drawings, the animators don't pick it up.
The rover is held together by zip ties, baby.
Every single detail is in there, so encourage people to look at it. It's fun.
Thanks, Justin. It really is some beautiful detail. Now we have a social media question to take. Jerome on Twitter asks, some pictures we can see dirt and small rocks inside the real wheel rim. Was this expected, and will it become an issue if more dust and sand is picked up along the way?
Yep, I can speak to
yes.
that. So it's not uncommon for us to have rocks and dirt inside the wheels, either from the landing event or as we're driving across the surface. You'll also notice on the deck, we also experienced some of that debris coming down on top of the rover. And we design our mechanisms for these conditions, so we don't expect any issue with the material from the landing event or as we continue to rove across the surface.
Thanks, Jessica. And right now we have a call from Eric Berger on ARS Technica.
Yes, hi. Thank you very much for doing this. Congratulations on such a stunning array of photos and videos. Al Chen mentioned the dust earlier, and it was striking as the spacecraft got close to the surface how much was kicked up. It's a 1-ton rover. It's pretty sizable, but when you're talking about human missions, it's much larger. And so, what does being able to see this dust tell us about the challenge of landing future kind of much larger spacecraft on Mars? Is that something that you're going to have to account for, and if is it going to be a really significant issue to deal with? Thank you.
Yeah, I think I can take that one. I mean, I think, as most people know, right there, as far as I'm aware, there are no landing pads on Mars or barges that we can land on, prepared places. So we're going to have to deal with, especially if we're going to use propulsion, we're going to have to deal with this plume-ground interaction. And it's really difficult. It's difficult to get right, to get the modeling right, to understand it, or even to do a real test that shows a good impression of what you're going to come down on, especially when you don't know exactly where you're going and what the terrain is like and what the ground properties are where you're coming down. So I do think this is a big challenge for us going forward. And that's why collecting this information here is useful. We can certainly begin to see how it actually behaved in real life and see how things began to move and what those scours are like. And we have a vehicle that'll tell us what the ground that we happened to land on was like, and we know how we were commanding those engines and where they were pointed. So we have a rich treasure trove here of data that we can use to kind of get at that kind of challenge. Because I do think it's a big one, especially as we start to land heavier and heavier things with bigger and bigger engines.
And up next on the phone lines is Joey Roulette from The Verge.
Hey, thanks for doing this. Earlier it was mentioned that scientists are already pouring through the thousands and thousands of images, and I was just wondering what about the surface or the rocks that you guys have seen so far from these images are standing out, and kind of what has been interesting from a scientific perspective. Thanks.
Oh God, that's not what I wanted.
Yeah.
Okay, Ken.
Sure. So you can go online and see that image that was put up during my little bit there. But we're noticing basically the different colors that we see and textures and tones. And so one thing that's striking to me, standing out to me and some of us, is that a lot of the rocks that are labeled as light rocks seem to have a rough texture. Whereas some of the darker rocks further afield that are higher standing, more like large boulders, seem to be smoother. That can mean something about the grain size and the potentially the composition of the rocks themselves. One of the things we're noting as the resolution gets better is that these light rocks closer to the foreground may actually be kind of dark on the inside, and that the light tone we see may be largely due to dust covering, and where the rocks stand up a bit higher and have less dust, they tend to appear dark. So a lot of, new patterns are emerging. And then, of course, one of the most exciting and interesting things are these, what we call the holy rocks, that are, in some cases right under our wheels, and these smaller cobbles that are right around the rover. I didn't mention, but one of the possibilities for those holes is that they are what we would call vesicles, which would be due to gas escape from a volcanic rock. We're not calling them vesicles at this point because it's important for us to stay open to the different possible interpretations and not get locked in yet on limited data. But if they are volcanic rocks, that is enormously important to us, because it potentially provides an opportunity to get a really nice radiometric age or an absolute date if a sample like that comes back to Earth. But then again, if you go back to images from many previous Mars missions, rovers and otherwise, you'll see that wind abrasion can cause those sorts of holes in all different types of rocks. So just a few of the thoughts that are emerging. And then, of course, we're starting to get views of the Delta Front now, which just have us, on cloud nine, looking at some of the targets further afield that we're excited to explore.
Great. Thanks, Ken. We have another phone line question. Mark Zastro from Astronomy Magazine.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. I guess this is a question for Al. And I was just wondering if you could speak to the performance of the landing vision system, if you've gotten a chance to dive into that, how the range figure and terrain relative navigation really performed, and just sort of what it was thinking, how it was making its decisions as it descended. And then when you look at its performance and its accuracy, how do you judge it? And can you see that improvement over Curiosity?
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, I was really hoping for a chance to speak to that a little bit, actually. The lander vision system, as part of the terrain relative navigation system, really did great. In fact, here's some stats, right? Based on the targeted, well, we took many images on the way down. We got tons of landmarks. We were very able to match up what we saw with our onboard map. It was almost perfect, better than many of our field tests or even simulations. So we got a very good lock on where we were. And in fact, when you combine that with our safe target selection and where we flew to, we only missed the targeted pixel by about 5 meters. So we were aiming for a particular spot on the planet once it decided what was reachable and what the safest spot was. And given
missed it by 5 meters, that's terrible.
And our system in flying us there, we only missed by 5 meters. So that was really great. I mean, I think we've really showed that this system can do what we wanted it to do in helping us figure out where to go and go to a safe spot.
Great. Thanks, Al. We have so many questions coming in that we are going to keep the phone lines open for a little while longer. Remember to press *1 to get in our queue. For now, I'm going to take a social media question from Bob on Twitter, who asks, how does the processing power of the onboard computer compare to a great smartphone? Matt, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. That's a good question. In the space business, we have to build things that we know are gonna work. And space is a pretty hostile environment, and the surface of Mars is even worse with the temperature swings, which we were talking about. You need systems that are capable of dealing with the radiation and the temperatures and really perform with very high reliability. So as a result of that, we have a tendency to use systems that have been around for a while, that are well shaken out. And on Perseverance, we're using the same computer that we used on Curiosity, in large part because we know it worked, and we wanted to have that successful flight heritage that we had from the previous mission. So this is a computer that you would have found 15 or maybe even 20 years ago that we're flying. Having said that, these EDL cameras, which we were just talking about, are off the shelf, state-of-the-art, new technology, and it is always a thrill for us when we have the opportunity, like we did in this particular application, to bring that kind of technology into our systems. It's a very powerful way to multiply our functionality and our capability. And so this was a great example of being able to use new technology. So I don't know if that's an exact answer to the question, but in short, that's that's a summary.
Great, thank you, Matt. And Thomas, we actually have a question for you coming in. Hayden, an 11-year-old from Ireland on Twitter asks, what advice would you give to a budding planetary scientist in working towards maybe being part of the mission that will bring back samples to Earth in the future?
Oh, I'm so glad for that question. I think about that a lot. And the advice I would give is, first of all, that's exactly the right time to get into that career. For Hayden, there could not be a better time to join that career. Even if you started 10 years earlier, or, in 10 years, now is the time to start that. The advice I would give is, go really start playing with data right away. Yes, go to school. The teachers that are there are your best allies going forward. Eventually, probably you'll be perhaps at the university or at an advanced school, but go to school, do that. But the other thing I want to just give you advice on, Hayden, is we're putting all these data out. Be your own researcher. Learn how to do that. Go play with it. That's what research is so much about, and find others who are just as excited as you are. And I'm sure soon enough we'll have you on our teams in the future.
That's some great advice. Thank you, Thomas. And up next, we have on the phone lines Alexandra Witz from Nature Magazine.
Great. Thanks very much. I'm not quite sure who to address this to, but I wanted to ask about InSight and whether InSight had heard Perseverance landing.
So I'm not sure anybody up here has the latest information. Do you, Al? Have you heard anything new?
Just heard from other folks on the team. I'm not sure if this is official or not, but that they hadn't seen much yet.
I think we'd have to check, to be honest, to be sure we get the right answer. So.
Great, thank you. And then another phone line question from Jackie Goddard from the Times of London.
Hello, congratulations everyone. One of the most common questions that I get from readers who aren't generally a scientific audience but regular folks is, what is the point of spending all this money to go to another planet and explore it? And sometimes that's not even a question, it's a statement. There are cynics out there. Can you say why we explore, and how does humanity benefit from you finding out what you find out and doing what you do? Thank you.
Give anyone who wants to answer time to answer.
Man, nobody wants to answer that because they're just thinking about how dumb that a question is. Jesus Christ.
Why don't I get started and turn it over to you, Matt? Is that okay if I start? Matt, you good with that?
Yeah, that'd be great.
So frankly, I'm thinking about this question all the time. Why do we explore? And of course, when we do that at NASA, I just want to let everybody know that if you look at how much money we're spending on each planet and the exploration of each planet, of course, the majority, the money the planet we're spending most money on, of course, is the Earth, the place where we live, where our friends live, where our history is, and where our future is going to be. And so we're not confused about the importance, and just as excited about the amazing future of what exploration is going forward. Exploration for us, though, is broader than just what is useful right now. And the reason we're so convinced that that is important is, first of all, the questions that have driven humanity, important questions, truly historic questions, in so many ways are what we're really about. Addressing those is what we're really about as humans. We want to be sure, as we look at our contributions of our generations, that we really move forward what we know, and also really affect how we think about ourselves. And that so often comes through research. There's a second reason, though. It's truly secondary, but I'm going to mention it anyway. So often, and surprisingly, the results and the technologies that we're building for the very questions that are really driven by fundamental science questions are extremely useful. And I just want to remind you that perhaps today, whoever asked that question is driving around in a car with a GPS system built for an entirely different purpose and looked at the weather forecast, which of course was not anticipated when in fact we built the first Earth satellite. So yes, we want to kind of focus on the immediate needs today, and it's really important, but it's so critical for us as a species to look forward and explore. Matthew?
Thanks, Thomas. I think you said it really well. You know, I've been landing things on Mars now for 25 plus years. And so I've had a chance to go out and talk to a lot of different people. And it's not unusual when somebody asks this question. And I used to, you know, have a long list of reasons. And there are a good long list of reasons. But fundamentally, I've come to the conclusion that in some ways it's kind of a moot question, because how can we not explore? It's just who we are. It's what we are. It's in our DNA. You know, you couldn't stop us as a species from exploring.
There it is. That's the answer.
The reason why we're, you know, at the top of the food chain is because we're curious, because we want to go to places we haven't been. We want to answer questions we don't know the answer to. Sometimes we want to find the questions we don't even know need to be asked. You know, it's just part of who we are, and it opens new horizons, new frontiers. It inspires us. It inspires kids. You know, and as Thomas mentioned, all the academic programs that are paying attention here, science to technology. That we bring to the table, that's important for us, you know, and I think that's the best I can do to answer that question. There's a lot of reasons.
All right. We can move on now to another call from Matt Kaplan from Planetary Radio.
Hi, everyone. Congratulations from not just me, but all of the Planetary Society. I've been texting with our boss, Bill Nye, the science guy, who has been watching everything along with us. And here's part of his reaction. Oh my, this is astonishing, dare mighty things. But here's my question for Ken Williford. Ken, getting these first images and video from so much closer to the surface of Mars than we have from the orbiters, in spite of the great job that they're capable of, does this start to make you think about the potential of doing this on a regular basis from balloons or, let's say, a helicopter?
Well, sure. You know, almost everything I'm thinking about right now is potential. I guess I've compared it, you know, to several people who have asked me how I'm feeling. You know, what's it like? And the closest thing I can compare it to is, I would say, the birth of my daughter, you know, where the cruise phase that's about 8 months long, you know, is like that 9-month period where you're just waiting and you're just hoping everything goes right. And then she's born. In this case, we're on the surface and it's real. And the potential is astounding. I mean, I was just, Katie Stack and I were just texting last night as we got some new images down, and we're just, you know, we're so excited, like kids, just looking at every picture and seeing so many new things and having so many new ideas and new questions are appearing. And the potential of it all is what strikes me more than anything. We have so far to go, so much to learn. And I just couldn't be more grateful to have made this transition from all the years of hard work and stress and wondering, you know, is it going to work out? How's it going to work out? To now when we actually get to do this thing. It's amazing.
Thanks, Ken. And up next, we have Irene Klotz from Aviation Week.
Thanks. Just looking ahead a bit, what's been this is probably for Jessica. Have you made any progress homing in on a site for the helicopter flight demos? And if so, about how far from the Perseverance landing site are those?
So the team has started to evaluate and is using the images that we've received from entry, descent, and landing, as well as now these images that we've acquired over the last couple sols. We are fortunate to have landed in a potential spot for that, but the team is still evaluating and is looking forward to additional imaging from the 360-degree panorama from the Mastcam Z, as well as future data that's to come down. So we have not locked in a site yet. That will still be work for the team to go looking forward, whether it's here or a few hundred meters away.
And we have a social media question coming in. Jake, who is 12 years old on YouTube, asks, was there one point you thought that this would be impossible to do?
That's a great question, Jake. There might have been many points when it felt a little impossible. I'll give you my one moment, and then the other folks may want to add in. And that's last March when the COVID pandemic struck. We had just shipped the spacecraft down to Kennedy. Dave Gruhl, who, believe it or not, this whole EDL camera gig is not what he does for a living. He was our assembly, test, and launch operations manager, and he, along with his deputy, Art Thompson, were responsible for assembling the flight spacecraft, testing it, and getting it down to the launch pad for launch. That's actually what he did for a day job. So the pandemic struck about a year ago, and Dave and I and Art and others were just constantly on the phone trying to figure out how to react to it and how to respond to it. I said it before, we didn't have a lot of margin, we didn't have a lot of time. We were figuring out a lot of things as quickly as we could, and our focus was shifted from trying to get the spacecraft built and tested correctly and staying on schedule for the launch, because if you miss it, you got to wait 2 years for these planetary launches to Mars. And suddenly our whole focus had to change to keeping the people safe and keeping their families safe as a #1 priority. And I wasn't sure, honestly, I wasn't sure we could do that. And I knew that if we couldn't keep them just as safe as they would be at home doing other things, that that could be it for us for this opportunity. We got tremendous support across the board from the institution.
Gonna go ahead and
Thomas,
switch this over. Do our planetarium show. We've been kind of streaming for a little while here. I'll lower this down a little bit. See if anything else comes up. I will bring it back to the forefront here. Let's bring our planetarium software up.
I'll add to that. One of the things about
all right. Hold on a second. Let's
jobs we have are
take you to the other screen here, and then we'll put you on the quiet list. We'll put some background. There we go. So, how are you all doing today? Thanks for joining us for that NASA press conference. The press conference went live at noon local time, so I joined it about a half hour late, which started our show a half hour early, so we missed everything. Wonderful. No, we didn't miss everything. We got a lot of things learned there, hopefully. Mars is going to be involved in pretty much every show from here on out for a little while. For obvious reasons. There we go. Alright, so let's start out with our astronomy picture of the day. Of course, from the other day, we looked at Mars. Because we were watching this live when it happened. The Mars Perseverance rover did land on the planet Mars. Oopsie daisy, that's the wrong thing I clicked on. One of the coolest pictures of it from the landing crane, I guess you want to call it. The sky crane, I believe is what it's called. Dropping the rover on the planet. Just a phenomenal thing to see. Little Tachikoma style butt. Rosette Nebula, that's really cool. take a quick peek at this. So you zoom in, you see again lots of interesting material. This is material floating around in space. Some of it is glowing like a neon bulb, so you get this beautiful glow of various colors depending on what element is in those particular clouds. This star cluster right in here likely formed from this material, and of course as they've heated up, they've blown away all this really cool looking ribbon right here of material being blown away. Let's see, can we zoom out a little bit? There we go, get a little clearer picture of this. Awesome. Okay, let's come back out of this. Again, astronomy picture of the day, you can look up yourself, astronomy picture of the day, in any favorite web browser of yours. You will get a photo every single day. Sometimes it's a video. It's okay. You'll also get a description, who took the image, where the image is, things like that, as well as an explanation. And within the explanation, of course, lots of links to go down the rabbit hole of finding new information. Also, more importantly, you've also got credits to the authors and different science agencies, so you can actually click on these people and find out more about them, what they do, and their research. So really, really helpful to look up astronomy picture of the day. And again, it goes back all the way to 1995. The current archive goes back to 2015, but then you can click on this right here. It says full APOD archive, and that takes you back to 1995. Some browsers have issues with it. I think it's got something to do with kind of the way modern Web 2.0 works. But again, you can go back as far as you want, depending on the age of your kids or your family or however. Pick a day, pick their birthday, take a look at it. I'm just going to pick a random day. Let's take a look at this. Boom, look at that. Another really cool picture of a cloud in space. Bright stars giving off these X-shaped rays. Really, really cool to see. Again, cone shapes right in here. Actual stuff, material being blown out into space through the heat and radiation of these various stars. Really cool to see. Okay, so in our planetarium, we do switch back and forth between various softwares, so I do apologize for abruptly going back and forth between scenes. Sit back and relax. Hopefully you have a nice drink or a snack with you. We're drinking a vegan protein shake today. Gotta keep our energy level up a little bit. Now, we are looking at the sky with, actually, time sped up a little bit. You'll notice the sun and the moon in the sky. The sun pathing from left to right, from east to west. So, to orient ourselves, let's talk about it. We have the south directly in front of us down here at the bottom of the planetarium. East is over here to our left. West is over there to our right, meaning north is behind us. So, ideally, this would be on a spherical or hemispherical dome, but we're doing it on your screen, on your computer screen, on your TV screen, on your phone, whatever you happen to be using. And again, we do appreciate you stopping by for our brief planetarium show. We did have that NASA press conference up front because that is really important. We'll look at those Mars photos a little bit later in the show. If you have any questions, I do see some people kind of mulling around in chat. Do feel free to ask questions throughout the show. It is okay to interrupt me, unlike an actual planetarium where you can't really see people because it's dark. This is on a computer screen, so feel free to ask a question, and I will try to address it or answer it as best I can. Also, just kind of sit back and listen. Relax. Enjoy. Let me just kind of be some soft talking in the background of your day, if you'd like. However you want it to be. Now, as the sun travels from east to west in the sky, the different wavelengths of light filter through our atmosphere. During the daytime, obviously, if you go outside, the sun will likely have the sky, I should say, will be a nice bright blue color, assuming you're in a good non-polluted area. The sky will have a blue tinge to it. Those are short wavelength light. Now think of a rainbow. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. Roy G. Biv. Blue and indigo and violet are those higher end, higher energy, shorter wavelength lights. Light rays, light waves. And they scatter off pretty prevalently during the daytime, so we get a nice bright blue sky. During sunrise and sunset, the longer wavelengths filter through the atmosphere a little bit easier, and so you get the yellows and the blue, the yellows and the oranges and the reds, I should say, giving us the sunrise and sunset that we all love to go out and look for. Now, occasionally you will see some little menus popping up. That is just me moving around. Please do not be alarmed. Here we are looking tonight at the sky, right around sunset. Planetarium set just before, I believe, 7 o'clock? 6 o'clock. Screen is so small I can't even see it. It's almost 7 in the planetarium. That's fine. And here we are facing south. Now, the first thing we'll talk about is our moon, because the moon is our celestial companion, and it's really, really easy to see tonight. Right at sunset, you'll see it. Actually, you'll see it outside right now as well, but at sunset, it'll be nice and high in the sky, really easy to see. So let's take a quick peek at how the moon functions as it orbits around our planet. To do that, let's go back to our web browser where we are going to be using... Come on, Bubbas. There we go. There we go. We're going to be using this. So here we look at our planet Earth and our moon and, in a way, our sun as well. The sun is off to the left of this image. Much, much larger than the moon and the Earth. The moon represented right here, as well as here. This is what we see from the Earth. This is the Earth looking at the North Pole. And you have our little observer right there. Now, as the moon orbits around the Earth, the angle between us and the moon, from our point of view, it does change. It reflects back a different amount of sunlight as it goes around. That is actually the reason why we have the phases. And the phases themselves have different names. You have waxing, when the bright side is on the right side. And, of course, they're named after what they look like. So a waxing crescent is going to look like a crescent moon in the sky. When the moon is 1/4 of the way around the planet Earth, you get what is called a first quarter moon, which will stop right here. So the moon is 90 degrees away in the sky from... I missed it a little bit, but that's fine. The moon's 90 degrees away from the sun in the sky, and it'll keep going. As you go from a crescent, you will then go into what's called a gibbous phase. A gibbous is not full, but it's not half either. It's kind of an in-between. Again, bright side on the right side, and so we see the moon appear to get brighter and brighter night after night after night. Full moon happens when the moon rises at the same time the sun sets. That'll be next week. And we'll talk about that. That means the moon and the sun are at opposition. They are opposite each other in the sky. As the moon continues in its orbit around our planet Earth, the moon will begin to look smaller and smaller and begin to rise later and later in the evening. So instead of seeing it right at sunset, you start seeing it at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, things like that, rising up over the horizon, till you barely see it. Now, you get to a point where you get to what's called a third quarter moon. The moon is, again, 90 degrees away from the sun in the sky, but this time the bright side's on the left side. You can tell where the sun is based on which side of the moon is lit up. If the bright side's on the right side, it's following the sun. If the bright side's on the left side, it is before. It is rising up before the sun rises up into the sky. You go from a waxing gibbous to a waxing crescent. So waning, I should say. Waxing, bright side on the right side. Waning, bright side on the left side. I should clarify that. There's the waning crescent. You see this right before the sunrise, just a few evenings before you get to new moon phase once again. And that's the phases of the moon. The moon does orbit around the Earth and rotate on its own axis. So a day on the Earth is 24 hours. A day on the moon That's a little different. Let's take a look over here. A day on the moon is going to be the length of a Earth month. As the moon orbits around the Earth, that's the wrong simulation. My apologies. Earth and moon. There we go. Let's take a look at the moon. Again, the moon is our celestial companion. Here we are looking at the Earth. The Earth at night, we'll talk about that in just a little bit. Let's actually zoom over here to our moon. Whee! There we go. So the moon is what's called tidally locked. As the moon orbits around our planet Earth, keeps the same face looking towards it the entire time. But it does rotate. You can actually kind of see that rotation happening here as we're not locking onto it. The moon does have a cratered surface. For a long time, people thought the moon was just a solid surface. You do see some craters. You actually see some mountain highlands up here. The darker areas you see are called the seas, or the mare of the moon. Once filled with lava, now just flattened out plains. The older areas of the moon are going to be the lunar highlands, these areas that are heavily cratered. Impacts from material that could have hit us, instead they hit the moon, so the moon is kind of like our shield, protecting us from many things impacting our planet. The craters all have names. I don't know them all. The seas all have names as well. There's plenty of lunar charts out there that you yourself can go and observe the moon at your own leisure. Here we see the back side of the moon. People like to call the back side the dark side of the moon, and that's not totally true. The back side of the moon does get sunlight during new moon phase, when the moon and the sun are in the sky at the same time, so we don't see the moon at night. We don't even see it during the day either. But the back side is getting sunlight, so you can't really call it the dark side of the moon, can you? Unless you're a Pink Floyd fan, but even then, still. Backside of the moon, heavily cratered. You don't see the mare seas as prevalently, because there aren't as many. The backside of the moon is actually a little bit thicker than the Earth-facing side. The Earth-facing side is going to be a little bit thinner, and you're actually going to have an easier time pulling what used to be lava under the surface up to the surface of the moon. The moon is now just a dead rock floating around. Now, it's interesting. There are some areas of the moon that are believed to have little bits of water hidden on them. Hopefully be finding out more and more about that as we begin to travel to the moon more often. Here we see the waxing moon beginning, with the bright side on the right side of the moon. And there again, you see the mare, the seas, pretty prevalently. Sea of Serenity, Sea of Tranquility, those are probably the more impressive ones right in here. Sea of Serenity, Sea of Tranquility. Places we've landed on the moon. Of course, there were 6 moon landings. But yeah, there's a good look at our moon. Now, depending on where you are on the Earth, the moon may look slightly different. If you're in the southern hemisphere, the moon might look upside down compared to this, but I digress. It's still the same moon. The other thing, especially as we talk about... Oh, there goes my phone. I should probably mute that. Especially as we talk about things as we go along, it all depends on light pollution. Now, what you see here is what we call light pollution. And on one hand, it's actually kind of cool. It's kind of pretty. You can see entire cities and the outline of certain countries just by looking at where the lights are. You can see the Nile River right here. You can see Egypt. You can see Paris. You can see London. As we come back around, you start to see the eastern seaboard of the United States. You see New York, London, New York, Boston, DC, Miami. While this is really cool to see, at the same time, you must understand that the areas that are nice and dark are where you want to be to see the sky. The bright areas are where we live. Those are all the cities. Those are the artificial lights of our civilization. making it easy for us to see at night, but it also disconnects us from the sky itself. And by that I mean we don't get to see a pure sky like we used to have long ago. Now, every civilization that has ever existed on this planet Earth has looked at the sky. Go back as far as Babylon and even further back to Sumeria and the cradle civilization in Mesopotamia between the Tigris and the Euphrates River. We have all these different civilizations pop up. You got the Indus River, you got in India, you've got China, Mesoamerica, the Olmecs. Any place you want to look on the Earth, you've got humans looking at the sky. Because, very obviously, daytime you're up, you're hunter-gatherers, you're trying to survive. At night, maybe you have a fire, maybe you don't. But you do have all these little points of light above you. And all very confusing and very curious. You do see one that seems to change very often. We already talked about it. It's the moon. You see it rising up. Every few nights it looks a little bit different. Goes through what we again call the phases, but that was very confusing to people long ago. There were some times where you got what we call eclipses, where the moon would be covered up by the shadow of the planet Earth, or the sun, the entire sun, would be covered up by the moon from our point of view. And those were considered terrifying things. Sometimes you look up and see a comet in the sky. Something that was unexpected. And these were all considered to be deities or messages from the deities above. No real science to understand any of this. Now, astronomy is one of the oldest professions. Astrologers, astronomer and astrologer are two different things. An astronomer studies the universe and studies the sky. You have subsets like astrophysics, where you study the actual motion and physical properties of the different objects in the sky. And then you've got, planetary biology and astrobiology, things like that, chemistry. Astrology has to do with particularly the motion of planets among a certain set of constellations and how that supposedly affects your life. It's not a science belief, it's just a belief system, which you can do what you want. I'm just here to talk about the sky. Both of those subjects were combined long ago. Various, once civilization began to have kings and leaders, ruling nations and city-states and things like that, they would oftentimes hire astronomers and astrologers to, divinate the sky and tell them, should we go to war with this other country, or should we do this, should we do that? Being able to tell what constellations were in this nighttime sky also kind of helped figure out what was going on in the daytime, and by that I mean you knew what season you were in. Certain constellations are only in the sky in certain seasons, and so you knew when you'd want to plant, when you'd want to harvest. The moon also helped with that, and also the location of the sun in the sky. Was it high up? Was it low in the horizon? When the sun is higher in the sky, it's going to be summer months, and when it's lower in the sky, it's going to be winter months. That was something that was discovered over time. But it was people that were studying the sky in the first place that determined this and figured out the science behind it all. Now, the Greeks had a term for these objects. They called them asteris. Means star. That's why the asterisk on your keyboard looks like a star. There were some objects that were called asteris planetis, meaning wandering star, or wandering, what we call, planet. Now, those 7 classical planets, as they were called, were the sun and the moon, which we know are not planets today. We don't call them planets today. We call the sun a star. We call the moon our satellite, the moon. But there were other objects that we can now call the planet Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. You could see them all without a telescope. Those 7 objects became the basis of the 7 days of the week. Sun, Sunday. Moon, Monday. Tuesday is Mars. Wednesday is Mercury. Thursday is Jupiter. Friday is Venus. And Saturn's Day. Just represented each planet. Classical planet. And we'll talk about the ones we can see this week, which is really only one. It's the planet Mars. Last month we had multiple planets in the sky in the evening, and unfortunately, as we've orbited around our sun, as we've continued to orbit around our sun, they've kind of slipped into a spot where we can't really see them. So unfortunately, we only get to really talk about Mars, which is fine, because Mars is really important to talk about. This line you now see on the sky represents the path the sun takes through the sky. You'll notice the moon also follows that path, and the planets will also follow that path. That path happens to be along a certain set of what are called constellations. A constellation is a group of stars with a set pattern, and usually there's a story behind them. Now, there is another type of star grouping in the sky. It's called an asterism. It's just a grouping of stars that makes a shape, but it's not an official constellation, or it's a portion of a constellation. It's kind of confusing. But, you know, officially there are 88 constellations in the sky, and they take up specific portions of the sky, represented by the red lines here. Let's actually zoom out a little bit more and take a look at this. This is what the sky looks like tonight if you were able to see all the constellations as bodies like this. Slightly less impressive with just stick figures. There's a path of 12 constellations. The sun, the moon, and the planets travel, and they are known as the zodiac. Remember I said astrology and astronomy used to be kind of one and the same. Those 12 constellations, well, there's 12 months of the year, right? They're all very related. 7 days of the week, 7 classical planets, 12 months of the year, 12 constellations. Astronomy, baby! Let's switch to Universe Sandbox real fast. The planets themselves orbit around the sun along this flattened out plane. Let's take a look at our sun real fast. Please don't stare at the sun. Please don't stare at the sun. This is our sun. It is a gaseous ball of hydrogen and helium fusing together in its core. Lots of other trace elements as well. And they are... This is located about 93 million miles away from the Earth. We call that distance an astronomical unit. It's the distance from the sun to the Earth. We like to measure distances within the solar system with astronomical units. In other words, if you're closer to the sun than we are, it'll be a decimal point or a half point, some sort of fractional point. So, for example, Mercury and Venus, Mercury's 0.42 astronomical units, and Venus is 0.7 astronomical units away from the sun, so they are closer. Anything further away from the Earth, from the sun than the Earth, is going to have a multiple of the astronomical unit. Now, Mercury is the innermost planet of the solar system. It's going to look something like this. A small, rocky world, desolate, scorched, heavily cratered. Poor, unfortunate soul. Named after the messenger god. In Roman mythology, this is Hermes in Greek. Very, very fast, super fast orbiting around the planet. You only around the sun, you only get to see this planet in the early morning or just after sunset very briefly. The one planet that is visible for about an hour or two before or after sunset, depending on where it is in its orbit, is this planet. This is the brightest of the planets in the nighttime sky, or in the early morning sky. This is the planet Venus. It has an atmosphere which reflects back a huge amount of sunlight, which makes it very, very, very bright. The atmosphere is toxic to humans, carbon dioxide rich. It's caused a runaway greenhouse effect, so the planet is completely inundated by heat and by this toxic cloud. It is kind of like Earth's evil twin. It's about the same size as our planet, but it rotates the wrong way. The sun rises in the west and sets in the east on Venus. And because of the slow rotation of this planet, it also pretty much stays in the same part of the sky most of the time. The day on Venus is almost as long as the year. It's very, very strange. We don't know why that is. Of course, we know about our beautiful planet Earth. Right here. And the final planet of the inner solar system is called Mars. The red planet, which is visible tonight without a telescope. We did look a little bit at this with our Mars rover. Obviously, Mars Perseverance landed just the other day in what is called Jezero Crater. Mars is about half the size of our planet Earth. Its day is about as long as our day, but a little bit longer, so it's a 24-hour, 37-minute long day. It's called a sol. Mars itself is a reddish-colored planet. There is a lot of evidence that there was likely water on the surface of Mars, and it looks kind of obvious when you really do pay attention to some of these surface features, things that look like they have almost like riverbeds or lakes flowing into them. This huge crack along the surface here is called Mariner Valley, or Valles Marineris. Right there. The planet itself likely cooled off very rapidly and may have shrank a little bit and actually caused this huge crack along the surface. If you were to place this on the Earth, it would go from San Francisco in California all the way to New York. New York. And so huge crevice along the surface, about 8 kilometers deep, 5 miles deep at its deepest point. Then you also have an area called Tharsis. Tharsis has these shield volcanoes over here to our left, and this large volcano, which we'll try to center here, there we go. That is Olympus Mons, Mount Olympus. It is about 400 miles across. Also sticks up 26 miles from the surface. Part of it sticks up slightly above the atmosphere. It is a huge volcano. Look at the United States on a map. The southwest United States, you'll see the state of New Mexico, you'll see the state of Arizona, you'll see Utah, and you'll also see Colorado. Pick one of those states. This volcano will fill up any of those states by itself. Again, evidence of water on Mars. There's also intriguing evidence that there may have been a lot more water on Mars than previously thought. We'll be finding out more and more from the Mars rover as we go along, the newest Mars rover on the surface. So those inner 4 planets, we call them the terrestrial planets, terra meaning Earth-like. So they are the Earth-like planets. They are small, rocky worlds. After you pass the planet Mars, you will find an area called the asteroid belt. Now, the asteroid belt is an area filled with lots of little planetoids. So let's actually take a look at that. Let's zoom out a little bit more. So let's pass Mars. Let's take a look at some of these asteroids. Now, some of these asteroids are going to be very, very oddly shaped, like potatoes and things like that. But other ones are going to be kind of more like this. Let's take a look at Vesta. Vesta is a small asteroid, but it's also round. It's spherical. Kind of cool. Really interesting to see. Take a look at another asteroid over here. See, this one looks a little different. Kind of just a junk pile floating around. That's what you kind of assume an asteroid's going to look like, right? Well, again, not always. Some asteroids actually are rounded in shape. Vesta's one of them. Pallas is another. Kind of spherical, so we call them planetoids. There we go. And you'll notice they all orbit kind of in their own way. Some of them are tumbling around. So not all asteroids are little junk piles. Very, very cool. Let's go to the outer solar system, and then just to do that, we're going to bring our solar system back online. There we go. The outer planets, you'll see, here's the asteroid belt in the middle here. The outer planets are very, very far away, starting with Jupiter, which is 5.2 astronomical units away from the Sun on average, so 5 times the distance of the Earth away. Again, you'll notice all the planets appear to be on a nice flattened out plane. That is the plane of the ecliptic. That is the zodiac from our point of view. Jupiter, the king of the planets, king of the Roman gods. It's a fast orbiting planet, fast rotating planet, I should say. A day on Jupiter, about 8.4 hours along its equator. A little bit longer at the North and South Pole. The Great Red Spot, you'll see it kind of come up and then go around. The Great Red Spot is a huge hurricane-like storm. These are the upper atmospheric clouds of the planet. That hurricane-like storm would fit the planet Earth in at about 3.5 to 4 times, depending on its size. Sometimes it does get a little bit bigger, sometimes it shrinks a little bit. When you look at Jupiter through a telescope, there are 4 moons known as the Galilean moons, the Galilean satellites named for Galileo Galilei, who first discovered them in 1610, oftentimes considered to be the father of modern astronomy. But this is the first of the gas giant planets that we're going to look at now. This next one is Saturn. Unfortunately, Saturn in this simulation is dumb. And I mean that in every single sense of the word, because they didn't put rings on it. I don't know why. That's what Saturn looks like without rings. However, when you look at it through a telescope, it's going to look something more like this. This is a NASA photo. Looking at Saturn. You see those beautiful rings. They are incredible to see, and it's almost surreal to see these rings through a telescope. The Cassini division is this large gap right in here. There's also what's called the Yankee gap, the smaller one right along the edge. These are icy rings that orbit around the planet right along its equator. You do see some moons. There's little dots you see here are actually satellites in orbit around the rings. There are some inside the ring system that we call shepherd moons. And then we've got these other little tiny baby planets. Basically, they're moons orbiting around the larger planet, largest of which is Titan, right down here. Titan has an atmosphere made of methane. Actually rains liquid methane on Titan. Very, very interesting little moon indeed. Let's come back to our simulation. Say goodbye to our weird ringless Saturn. Next planet up would be Uranus, which is right there. Uranus is a ringed world. Actually, all the gas giant planets are ringed. Saturn is the only one whose rings you can actually see from the Earth. Uranus is another one of these enigma planets, and by that I mean it is tilted over on its side. It orbits around the sun in a very weird way, in the sense that half of its year the North Pole faces the sun, half of the year the South Pole faces the sun, so part of the year the equator faces the sun. It's just very, very strange. The entire planet's tilted over on its side, the rings are on their side, the moons are on their side, the entire system just got kicked over. And no one has a single clue as to how or why that is. There are a couple of hypotheses, but no one's really sure, because we just don't know yet. This is Neptune, the world named after the sea god Neptune, or Poseidon in Greek. Very, very blue color to it. Again, this all depends on the upper atmosphere and what elements are going to be there to give off these various colors. Uranus and Neptune are about the same size. They are very, very far away from the Earth, so they're actually kind of hard to get to for observational sake. Jupiter and Saturn have been visited far more often. Very few orbiters have lived around Uranus or Neptune for all that long. They just kind of pass by, take some photos, and keep going. There's not long-term observation. I think that's kind of a shame. I think we should have at least one orbiter around every planet, just so we can be observing, so we can see as different things happen, what effects could be happening to other worlds, whether it's, solar flares, whether it's, something passing by, if there's a black hole, for example, passing by, or some sort of outburst we detect from space. we ought to be able to see what's happening on every planet in our solar system. At least that's what I think. As we zoom away, we notice that our sun is just a little tiny dot. Our sun is what's called a yellow dwarf star. Oh god. Our sun is a yellow dwarf star. And this is just one little star amongst a huge number of stars. You'll notice that cloud in the background. That's not just a cloud of dust and gas, it's also a cloud of stars. That is our Milky Way, and we will talk about the Milky Way galaxy in just a little bit. We just wanted to kind of introduce the solar system to you and why things look a little differently when you look at it from our point of view here on the Earth. Here we are once again. We now know why all the planets appear to be on a nice flattened out plane. The plane of the ecliptic. Now, of course, tonight you'll be able to see the planet Mars. It'll be the only object in the nighttime sky other than the moon that will not be twinkling. Stars twinkle, planets don't twinkle. The moon does not twinkle. That's one way to find it. The other way is to learn how to read the sky. The planets, as I mentioned before, they were wandering stars. They moved through the sky. But the rest of these objects, they stay fixed. From our point of view, they're all very far away. They're all different distances away. But from our point of view, they seem to be in the same spot all the time. Now, the easiest way to find your way around is to learn how to read the sky, learn how to find some of these shapes. And so, we're going to start out with possibly the most famous constellation, and it's one of the easiest to see, especially during the winter. It is a constellation called Orion, the Great Hunter. It has 3 stars in the middle of it, known as Orion's Belt. It has a star along the bottom right-hand portion of it called Rigel. It is a knee star. It's a bright blue star. And then his shoulder star named Betelgeuse. Directly at an angle across from it, there is another shoulder star named Bellatrix. And then his other knee star is called Saiph. You make a little box around here. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's the box around. There's 3 stars in the middle. That's where you find Orion. He does have a shield or a sword. It all depends on which mythology you want to look at. Sometimes he's holding an unbreakable club and he's got a lion pelt in his hand. Other times he's got a shield and a sword and he's trying to fight a bull named Taurus. He's trying to get to 7 beautiful maidens. Other times he's been placed up in the sky as a memorial because he was accidentally killed by the lunar goddess Artemis. She shot an arrow at him and killed him by accident. She was challenged to hit a very distant object. She didn't know it was actually him. And she hit that target with her bow and arrow, and it turns out it was her love, Orion. So he ended up being put into the sky as a memorial. Other stories have him being kind of violent towards animals, and so some of the more naturalistic gods were not very pleased with that, and so they sent a scorpion to dispatch him, and the scorpion had a very venomous tail and stung him in the foot. And they placed him and the scorpion in opposite sides of the sky. That's supposedly why you have Orion in the winter months, and during the summer months you have Scorpius, or Scorpio. So they're separated in the sky. Lots of different stories for just this one constellation. All depends on which culture you want to talk about. Now, we're going to use Orion to find a bunch of different constellations. So, put on your thinking caps and let's draw some lines. We're going to draw a line from Orion's belt to these 3 stars in a line right here. We're going to draw a line right through them and go in this direction. We're going to find the brightest star at night, and it is a star named Sirius. Hi, buddy. Yeah, that's also the name of our dog, so every time I do this section of our show, the dog gets a little wonky because he thinks I'm talking to him. Sirius is the dog star. It is the brightest star at night. It is in the constellation Canis Major. This is the big dog, one of Orion's hunting dogs. You'll see a very thin kind of dog shape. Looks like a tail right down here, and kind of the head, and this star is the heart of the doggy. Draw a line from Sirius up to Betelgeuse, like that. and then draw a line in this direction. We're making a triangle. This particular triangle is an asterism. It's made up of 3 bright stars. Each star is in a different constellation altogether, but this grouping is called the winter triangle. We see it only during the winter months. That last star is named Procyon. It is the brightest star in Canis Minor, which is the little dog. Now, the little dog is only 2 stars, just these 2 right here. So it's basically a dachshund in the sky. It's a wiener dog. Here we go. So we've already found 2 constellations just using Orion. Draw a line from Betelgeuse straight down through Saiph and keep going. And you'll see this little box right here. This little box of stars makes up the body of Lepus, the hare. This is a bunny rabbit hanging out right below Orion. Kind of a strange place to put a rabbit since, you know, he's a hunter. But, that's where the rabbit hangs out. Coming back up to Orion, you never want to use the moon, but if you go out tonight, the moon is sitting in the constellation known as Gemini. Tomorrow night and the night after that, the moon will not be there in that part of the sky, so don't look tomorrow night and be like, oh, it's in Gemini. It's not. It won't be. However, to find the Gemini twins, we use Orion once again. We draw a line from his knee star, Rigel, all the way through Betelgeuse, and keep drawing. We'll end up right up here, parallel to 2 different stars. These 2 parallel stars are about the same brightness. They are twins in the sky. One is named Castor, the other is named Pollux. You will notice the kind of stick figure shape of the Gemini twins in the sky. And again, the moon is in Gemini tonight, and it's going to be going in this direction. So tomorrow night it'll be further this way, entering into what's called Cancer, the crab, going further this way. Go back to Orion. Draw a line from Rigel up through Bellatrix, the other shoulder star, and keep going. Go up this direction. Unfortunately, I gotta rotate here. You're looking for a nice bright yellow star straight up from here. In fact, you're going to see kind of a hexagon shape up here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stars, making a nice weird hexagon shape, or even like a home plate looking shape in the sky. Home plate doesn't have this extra part, but look for the home plate, and you'll kind of start to see the extra stars. This is Auriga, the charioteer, sometimes holding onto a goat. That bright star is named Capella. And finally, let's get rid of that line. Let's get rid of the stick figures and the figures. There we go. The last thing we want to look for is Taurus the bull. Now, Taurus has a very bright V of stars. They are called the Hyades. To find them, draw a line through the belt of Orion, right here. Keep going, and you will find a V of stars. You will also find a little patch of stars. We're going to draw a line all the way through there. We're going to talk about both. The V of stars, again, is the face of Taurus the bull. The bright red star there is Aldebaran, is the eye of the bull. Just behind the eye of the bull and the Hyades, you find this little tiny patch of stars. These are the Pleiades, or the Pleiades. The 7 sisters, Subaru, however you want to refer to them. It is an open star cluster, a cluster of young stars that are kind of burning up this cloud that they were formed from. They're all spreading apart in space. The star that I happen to click on is Alcyone. That's the name of our kitty. So we have a star cat and a star dog. We are those nerds. Just below the Pleiades, you find the planet Mars, or you can draw a line straight through Orion's belt and just keep going, and right now you can point directly at the planet Mars. It will not be twinkling, it's just a bright reddish-colored object. It's kind of hanging out in the sky. There we go. Beautiful planet Mars. So just being able to find Orion, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different constellations around it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 constellations plus Orion. We've just found 7 constellations of the 88 total in the sky. That's pretty cool. Cancer the Crab is really hard to see, to be completely honest. It's even in a good setting, it's hard to find Cancer the Crab. However, Leo the Lion does rise up around sunset, give or take. You find this by looking towards the eastern horizon and looking for a question mark. Now, Leo has oftentimes been referred to as like the Sphinx in the sky. Some of these constellations do go back as far as ancient Egypt, where Orion was actually referred to as Osiris, and I believe Sirius was actually referred to as Isis, which is Osiris's wife. But here we see a Sphinx in the sky, a backwards question mark. This is going to be Leo the Lion. Again, this is one of those zodiac constellations. The backwards question mark is punctuated at the bottom with a bright blue star named Regulus. Now, we'll talk about stars in a little bit, but in general, or as a rule, blue stars are very, very hot. Now, we use the sun as the kind of the midpoint. Sun is considered to be our yardstick, our measuring stick, because it's our closest star to us, and it's the one that we observe the most. So we compare everything to the sun. Blue stars are hotter than the sun, physically hotter. Doesn't necessarily mean they're always bigger, but they are physically hotter than the sun. Conversely, redder colored stars are colder than the sun. Now, stars can be very, very big. Some stars are like the sun, where they're just little tiny blobs in the sky. Then there are some stars that are even smaller than the sun, but much hotter. Then there are stars that are called red giant stars. They are special stars. They are stars that are nearing the end of their life cycle. Stars like Betelgeuse and Aldebaran, which we already have talked about in our show. Antares, the heart of Scorpio, is another one of these red giant stars that are easily seen at night. They are stars that are huge. They would take up the entire inner part of the solar system. What do I mean by that? We'll look at it in a little bit, but if you were to put one of those stars in our solar system, it would take up all the space from the sun all the way out to the planet Jupiter. Just the star itself. So the star will puff up and become really, really huge. Unfathomably huge for us. Last grouping of stars I want to talk about before we start talking about deep sky stuff and, what's out there. Comparing stars, then comparing galaxies, what a galaxy is and all that. We are now facing north. We've kind of turned all the way around. In the northern part of the sky, you will see the most famous group, another famous grouping of stars. This, however, is not a constellation. We are talking about an asterism called the Big Dipper. These 3 stars here make up the tail. These 4 stars here make up the cup. For a total of 7 stars. They make up, again, the Big Dipper, but that is not the constellation. The constellation is actually Ursa Major, the Big Bear. Don't ask me why this is how it works, but this is what we're officially taught, and this is officially how the sky is broken up. The asterism, the Big Dipper, is part of the Ursa Major constellation. These last 2 stars I've left highlighted, they are called pointer stars, for they will point you to Polaris. Draw a line out like that. There we go. Why does this star matter? This star right here, Polaris, the pole star. The North Star, the lodestar. Well, let's double check and make sure we've hit it. I mean, I clicked it and it says Polaris, but you can't do that in real life. So how do you verify again? We've got the Big Dipper over here. We've also got a constellation called Cassiopeia. Cassiopeia has 2 different triangles. One is a squished, kind of obtuse triangle. One is an equal-sided triangle right in here. She is a beautiful queen on a throne, very vain, looking at herself in the mirror, of course. Use one of the triangle, either triangle, I should say, to find Polaris. Let's try that. So let's make this triangle. Let's do the equal-sided one first. Draw a line through the middle towards the Big Dipper. Okay. Let's try the obtuse one. Let's go that way, that way, that way. Draw a line towards the Big Dipper. Seems good. The Big Dipper and Cassiopeia are always opposite of each other in the sky. So when one is high in the sky, the other is low in the sky. When one's in the east, the other's in the west. You'll notice that as we let the sky rotate, they all seem to rotate around, from our point of view, this star right there. That is Polaris, the pole star, the North Star, the lodestar. Our Earth happens to be pointing towards it. It's not exact, it's not pointing directly at this star, but it's pretty close. So all the different stars rise and set in the sky, except for these ones extremely north, close to Polaris. Now, Polaris hasn't always been the North Star. There's a star named Thuban. If I can click it right, that would help. There we go. Helps if I pick the right star. Let's get rid of the atmosphere. There we go. Thuban is actually the star that we now have highlighted. That used to be the North Star long ago. Over many, many years. I think it's 26,000 years for precession to happen, for the Earth to kind of point all the way to Thuban and back, so everything kind of shifts over time. But this is why we call it the North Star, the lodestar, the pole star, because it's always in that part of the sky, and if you can find the North Star, you can find your way around. You know which direction is north, which direction is south, east, and then west, and then you're able to kind of navigate your way around just by using the stars. That's very, very cool. Let's reset things to tonight. One last thing I want to talk about is something in the deep sky. Now, to find this deep sky object, oh gosh, here we go. We need to once again find Cassiopeia, that 3 shape in the sky, or the E shape in the sky. Draw a line through this triangle once again. So we're going to make the triangle and look at the tip of the triangle. Draw a line through the tip and keep going. You're going to end up over here in a constellation called Andromeda, the Chained Maiden. Now, she's really hard to see because it's close to the horizon, unfortunately. But it's kind of an A-shaped constellation going up this way. And just off of this A shape, right there, it's the one that we just pointed at, is what was for a very long time called the Andromeda Nebula. A nebula, of course, is one of these gas clouds we've been talking about in space. As it turns out, it is not a nebula. As telescopes got better, and as cameras in particular got better, we began to notice a lot more detail to this nebula. It turns out this is not a nebula at all. This is actually an entire galaxy. A galaxy is a collection of billions of stars, millions of stars, billions of planets, lots of gas, lots of dust. They all have different shapes. There's actually another galaxy right over here that is a elliptical galaxy. It looks like a big football. But this is a spiral galaxy. We believe our Milky Way looks something like this. There are some subdivisions to these things. So like there's a spiral galaxy. There's also what's called a barred spiral. So there's a weird horizontal bar of stars between one side and the other side of the galaxy. Very strange. Ellipticals can be very round, or they can be very football shaped. And then there's another style of galaxy called an irregular galaxy, which is just kind of like a big debris field, because galaxies actually can collide. I just thought of one more thing. I should have done this earlier. I apologize. We're going to talk about galaxies in a second. We're going to go back to one last thing. Remember we talked about Orion earlier? 3 stars in the belt. Just below the middle belt star. Just draw a line straight down. You really cannot miss it. There's a little cloud. If you look at it through a telescope, it'll look like a cloud. It's actually a little cocoon of stars. There's stars being born here. This is a stellar nursery, as it's called. The stars are being born, and they don't live like a human would, but they are created. Gases all kind of coalesce and ignite up on their own. They start fusing hydrogen into helium, start giving off their own light, producing energy. Very, very cool. That's all again visible tonight, just below the belt of Orion. We're going to switch now to our other software. Hey, you're welcome. If you can't stay till the end, that's quite all right. Thank you for stopping by. Please tell your friends. Again, we do this every week, twice a week, hopefully. It's a pleasure to have you here. Have a good afternoon. Again, feel free to ask questions. Not too many people talking. Looks like there's just some people kind of hanging out, which is totally cool. Let's take a look at star sizes. We talked about stars a little bit earlier, so what we're going to do, we're not going to load a simulation. We're going to empty the simulation altogether. So we just have empty space now. And we're going to play God. No, we're not going to play God. We're just going to start adding some things in, just so that we can get some ideas. Let's take a look at the sun. Let's put the sun right here. How about that? So there's our star, the sun. We're going to stop all the motion. We're just going to leave everything here. Now, the sun is not very big, believe it or not. But compared to some stars, the sun is big. Let's take a look at Wolf 359. There we go. Wolf 359 is a reddish-colored star, and you'll see it's about half the size of the sun, give or take. Maybe, well, actually, it's a lot smaller than the sun. But you see very distinct difference in color. Very red, very cold, much smaller than the sun. We did not talk about Wolf 359, that's correct. We did not talk about that during the show, but we're just going to be putting examples out. Let's use some of the stars we did talk about in the show. For example, we talked about Sirius, where we're going to see it in the nighttime sky tonight. Look at how much brighter and actually how much bigger Sirius is than our own sun. Again, caveat, they are not this close in reality. We're just using an empty space. We're going to be comparing stars and star sizes. Here is Sirius compared to our sun. Again, blue stars are very hot. They live by the live fast, die young mentality. Yellow stars, they live a lot longer. Red stars live even longer. Caveat to that are red giant stars. Red giants are stars that are at the end of their life cycle. And you'll notice that it's forcing me to come out here. Because look at the immense size. Look at the sun right there. There's the sun. And then look at Betelgeuse, or Betelgeuse, or however you want to call it. Look at the difference in size between our sun and Betelgeuse. What else did we talk about? We talked about Procyon. Procyon we'll put in here. You'll notice Procyon is kind of like our sun. It's just a little tiny star. Yep, sees. Now, where's Procyon at? There's Procyon. There we go. A little bit brighter white. A little bit hotter. Spica is a summertime star. We're going to put it in here anyway, just to kind of give you a good example of the difference in colors of stars, and more importantly, the difference in sizes. Look at these, again, that's Sirius, the brightest nighttime star, which means it must be pretty close to us. It is. The sun, very close to us, very, very bright from our point of view, but intrinsically is not all that bright comparatively. But look at this immense size of Betelgeuse. Let's see here. Antares is another one of these red giants. What's another one? Oh, they don't have Aldebaran. Well, that's unfortunate. I was trying to bring up all the stars we talked about, but that's okay. This just gives you an example of how big these things are comparatively. So when stars do get very old, they do get very, very huge. Better way of looking at this is let's look at the actual solar system that we had before. And let's just replace the sun. Oh god, that's not what I wanted. Let's replace the sun with something bigger. Oops. Put in 2 of them. So notice, just one star, this is Betelgeuse, takes up a good, pretty much everything on the inside of our solar system. These things are huge. When they explode, they seed different elements into the into the space around them, and into that right back there. That is the Milky Way. Our star is just one of millions and millions of stars in what we call the Milky Way galaxy. Stars are created, they are born, and then they live their lives out, and they explode violently, or they die quietly. They seed different types of materials into the solar systems around them, and the solar systems that formed from them. But this is the overall system. Our star is just one of many, many, many stars in this, the Milky Way, what we believe our galaxy looks like, give or take. Might have a little more definition near the interior part, but we can't really see that from our point of view, so we're just going to have to go with this. It's a spiral galaxy, so like a big whirlpool floating around a centralized core, a supermassive black hole that may or may not consume things. Over time, you'll notice things are orbiting around, stars and gases orbiting around a central core. Our Milky Way is but one of many galaxies. In particular, there's what's called a local group. So just like our star is the sun, and there's a family of planets around it, correct? That's our solar system. Well, all the stars in our Milky Way, we all orbit around this, in this particular galaxy that we call the Milky Way. That is our galactic family. As it turns out, there's an even larger family called the local group, which includes our Milky Way and some of our nearby neighbors. So there's the Milky Way, slightly lower resolution, I don't know why. There's some of the nearby galaxies, the Sagittarius Dwarf Galaxy. If you live in the southern hemisphere, you've probably heard of the Large and the Small Magellanic Cloud. Those are 2 clouds of material. Looks like the Milky Way may have eaten something before and left behind these little clouds of gas and dust. I wouldn't really call them little. The Large Magellanic Cloud is actually very, very large, but it's further away and still looks bigger than the Small Magellanic Cloud. Go figure. Which implies it's very, very large. Alright, so there's the Milky Way. So this is the local group of galaxies. This is our little galactic family. Now, the largest of this particular group is up here. Let's realign ourselves. We talked about it during the show. It's the Andromeda Galaxy. What we didn't talk about was the distance. The distance from our Milky Way to the Andromeda Galaxy is about 2.25 million light years. That's the distance light can travel in a single year. It's a very, very large distance for a human, but for stars, it's not all that much. However, even at this scale, 2.25 million light years is a very far way away. We traveled that in just a few seconds, but that's because we're in a simulation. Over time, in space, if you have more mass, you have more gravity and will have more things pulled towards you. That's the gravitational dance in empty space. Over time, the Andromeda Galaxy and the Milky Way, all of these galaxies are trying to find equilibrium. They're all trying to pull each other towards the biggest one, whoever has the most mass, and that happens to be Andromeda. Sometime in the future, a few million years down the line, our galaxies will merge together. It's a beautiful dance, but it'll be a little destructive to both galaxies. Over time, the galaxies will merge together. And then over time, stars will be thrown out into space, deep space. Some of them will merge together, some of them will collide, you never know. There's a huge amount of stuff we didn't cover. Just trying to get you interested in astronomy. We do have new videos that we're making. In fact, I've got 3 videos that are all in various stages of editing at the moment. We are finally launching our Astronomy 101 video set, and so we're going to cover kind of an introduction to what we're doing, and then we're going to do an introduction to astronomy. You know, what astronomy is, some of the tools that we use. It's even going to be some math tutorials in it, so if you're afraid of the math, that's quite alright. It'll teach you what you need to know, or at least how to understand what you need to know. We do stream to Twitch and Facebook and YouTube all at the same time. We multi-stream. So please feel free to follow us on any channel that you prefer. Whichever social media site you prefer to use. That brings us kind of to the end here of our show. We hope you enjoyed learning a little bit. Hope you enjoyed watching the NASA live feed. We're going to try to jump into those every few days because it looks like we're going to have a lot of them coming up. Every Monday and Wednesday and Friday we'll be here doing astronomy live streams, so please feel free to stop by and ask questions or just hang out and watch. We do appreciate any follows. We do see a couple of new follows. We do appreciate that. Please subscribe if you'd like, so you get all of our newest videos when they go up and any surprise live streams that we do. Share us with your friends or family, you know, people who have kids or people who are just curious. Again, we're more than happy to answer questions and talk about whatever you'd like. I do have a set thing, you know, kind of a script I want to follow of daily astronomy stuff, but more than happy to stop and talk about whatever you would like. So with that, we end our stream. We'll see you on Wednesday. We'll see what new stuff we talk about with the planet Mars. From the new Mars rover Perseverance on the surface. Have yourselves a wonderful afternoon, evening, morning, whatever time it happens to be for you. Please take care of yourselves and each other. We'll see you next time. Have a wonderful day.